Today I'm going to show you how to make a cute little puppy marionette. A marionette is just a puppet that is controlled by strings. So in order to get it to move, I'm using these popsicle sticks. Now the very first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to paint our toilet paper rolls. So think the color that you want to use, and then use whatever you have to color them in. So you might be using markers, or you might be using watercolors like me, or if you have tempera paints, you can use those too. Whatever it is you choose is okay. And then you're just going to let them dry before we create it. Once your toilet paper rolls have dried, you're going to pick one that you want to use as your head and find a point that's a little bit past halfway and cut it there. And now we're going to pick up the smaller piece and then just cut it along the side so that it opens up. At this point, we're going to cut the tail by cutting a thin strip along the edge. Now this piece is going to be pretty long, but don't worry about that. Later on, we're going to trim it down a little bit. So once you have it, just put it to the side. Then the last thing we're going to do with this remaining piece is we're going to draw a really long, stretched out figure 8. So I'm going to find the part that's bent in the middle and mark it so I know where the middle of my 8 should be. And then I'm going to fill the space with the number 8. And here you can see my really stretched out figure 8. When you make yours, it's very important that you fill up your space. Really make sure the edges of your number 8 almost touch the sides, or actually do touch the sides. You don't want it to be too skinny. Then you're going to cut around your figure 8. What's important to remember is that when you get to the middle, you don't want to actually touch the center. If you do, it might be a little bit too thin or too weak and it could break there. So leave a little space next to the middle and then cut the rest of it out. So when I'm done, you can see that I didn't cut it out perfectly. It's okay that I didn't cut exactly on my lines because we're not going to see this side anyway. These are going to be the ears of our dog. Now to attach the ears to the head, we're going to hold our toilet paper tube sideways like this. And then we're going to put our finger on one end of our little tube and we're going to poke it down. And then we're going to fold it around our finger. And this is going to be where we place our ears. So it's just going to give it a spot to sit like this. So again, you're just poking it down and folding it like this. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add 2 holes to the head. The first one's going to be on top. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a teeny tiny little cut going diagonally. You really don't want it to be too big. So if you can see here, I barely have a little cut there. And then we're going to also cut the opposite direction. So you end up with this almost triangle shape here that you can pull out, just like this. And then on the other side, we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to look at the opposite end, and we're going to put it more towards the one side. So we're going to look to see that it's on the same side that's folded, trace our finger down, and put our hole there. So again, I'm going to cut a really small hole here using 2 diagonal lines. I'm going to cut first one way, and then I'm going to cut the opposite way. And when I'm done, I should see a little triangle here that I can just pull out like this. And make sure you keep these holes small, because if it's too big, your yarn will just slip through later on. Now at this point, we can go ahead and attach our ears with a little bit of glue, making sure they're sticking out like this. Now while the head is drying, we're going to go ahead and put the holes in the body. So for that, we're just going to flatten it out like this. And then we're going to start by putting the 2 holes on the top of the body. So one on each end. And for that, I'm going to do it just like the head. I'm going to make a small diagonal cut one way, and then another small diagonal cut the other way, and then just pull off the little triangle that I've created. So that's one end, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. A diagonal cut, another diagonal cut, and then take out the triangle. So right now I've got the 2 holes on the top side, and now we've got to put the 4 holes on the bottom. So the bottom is a little bit more complicated because a dog has 4 legs, 2 in the front and then 2 in the back. So for that, we're going to change the shape. We're going to make a tall triangle like this. And that's going to help serve as a guide so that our legs are even. So we still have the 2 on top. And now we're going to put 2 holes near the top, and those will be the front legs, and 2 holes near the bottom for the back legs. So that when I'm done, I have 2 holes on the top of its back and 4 holes on the bottom for its legs. Now the next step that we're going to do is we are going to add a tail. Now we have this long skinny piece, and I'm not going to use the whole thing because that's very long, so I'm just going to cut it in half and use the half of it. And then I'm just going to attach it to the back with a little bit of glue. So once we have the basic shapes done, you can go ahead and decorate it however you want. You give some spots or decorations. It doesn't have to look realistic. You can add some eyes, a mouth, whatever it is you'd like to do. Once your dog is dry, then it's ready to add the string. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the legs, so these holes on the bottom here. So I'm going to take a little bit of yarn, and I'm going to cut a longer piece than I need for now, and then I'm going to cut it shorter later. Then I'm going to take one of these pieces of yarn, and I'm going to put it through one side and back out the other side. So now this is what it should look like. It should have these 2 long pieces hanging down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread 2 noodles through here. I used penne pasta, whatever you want to use is fine. If you use a thinner noodle, you can actually just tie a knot at the end and it won't go through. Since I've got a pretty large hole here, I can't do that. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to wrap it around this last noodle, the second one away from his body, and then I'm going to tie a double knot above the noodle. So I'm going to make 1 knot here like this, and then I'm just going to do a second knot right in the same spot. Like that. And then I'm going to pull it so that it's closer to the body. So it should be like this. We don't want it hanging too low. And then on the other side, I'm going to string 2 more noodles on. Now here I've got a lot more string left, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that it's hanging close to his body. I don't want to tie my knots far away because then his legs will be uneven. So I'm going to bring this up to his body, separate a little bit of space between these 2, and that's where I'm going to tie my double knot. So there's one, and then I'll tie a second one there too. Like that. And then whatever string I have left over afterwards, I can just cut. I might also want to put just a little dot of glue here so that it doesn't come undone on both of my knots. Then I want to make sure they're both the same length, and I can do the same thing with the two front legs. At this point, I'm going to need two longer pieces of string that are going to go through each one of these sides. So I'm going to cut myself a piece of string or yarn, whatever it is. And then what I'm going to do with this is, before anything, I'm just going to tie a double knot on one end. And I want it to be kind of thick because I don't want it to go through this hole. It has to be wider than this hole in the back. So I actually might even do 3 knots just in case. And then on the side that doesn't have the knot, I'm going to put it through the hole right here. So that now that little knot stops it from going through. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now for this next step, I want to decide how long I want to make the neck. I don't want it to be too long. And what I'm going to do is, where I want the neck to be, I'm going to tie a double knot again. So I'm going to just make my neck a little bit shorter so that it's about this long. And when I like how far down it is, I'm just going to tighten that up and then do a second knot there as well. That's going to keep the head in the correct spot. There we go, and I might do a third one actually, just to make sure it doesn't go through. And before I tighten it, each time I'm checking to make sure that that knot's going to be in the right spot. Good. And then what I'm going to do with this is, I'm actually going to put it through the bottom of the head first, and then through that hole in the top of the head. So I'm going to put it through this way, and I see that this has come undone. So what I'm going to do is cut it shorter here so that it's a little bit easier to put through. And if I twist it, then it'll go through a little bit easier. So it goes to the bottom of the head first, and then I'm also going to put it through that little hole in the top of his head. So now it sticks in the right spot, like that. And then we have one last step. In the other puppet that I showed, the other Marionette, I had 2 popsicle sticks, like this. Okay, we actually don't need these 2 sides, so if you only have 1 popsicle stick, that's perfect. If you don't have any popsicle sticks at home, that's actually okay too. You can just bring in a stick from outside and just use a regular stick, because all you have to do is tie it, the yarn on each end. So now these last 2 pieces here, I'm just going to tie it around a popsicle stick. So I'm going to make sure that it's nice and tight, and when I find a good spot for it, then I'm also going to put a dot of glue. So here's 1 knot, I'm going to do a double knot here just to keep it in place. And this is a little bit loose. I could actually take this off, which is why I want to put my glue there, just to make sure it doesn't move. Now this part, you have to sort of make sure that it's the same length away from the popsicle stick. So when I go to put this on here, I don't just want to tie it anywhere. I want to see how far up it needs to go, because it should be pretty straight across. His body should be straight when it's hanging on there. So this looks pretty good, and that's where I'm going to tie it. And then the last step that I'm going to do is, I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on here, make sure it goes all the way around, and then let it dry, because I really want those strings to stay in place. So I'm gently going to put it down and let it dry where it is. Once your puppy is done drying, you can go ahead and use it like a marionette.